Hey, it's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. I got a number of you responded to my video thought for the day yesterday on stress. And it made me think that maybe today I'll deal with another emotion and just kind of how we process these things biblically. And the emotion I thought I'd deal with today is grief. Grief is something that everyone experiences at different times of life. Grief is something we encounter when things just devastate us, rip us apart. The loss of a loved one, the falling apart of relationships, or just turmoil in various devastating losses that we might have. For some, it's an economic loss. Different grief comes in different forms and for different reasons, but it's something we're all familiar with. And it's not surprising that the Bible deals with grief. And it deals with it in some interesting, insightful ways that I want to throw out just for you to consider today. Maybe you're processing some grief, and these will help you. Maybe you know others who are processing grief. Maybe you can forward this to them. Maybe you just sort of file this away because grief will come to you if you live long enough. That's almost a guarantee. So people talk about the stages of grief and how, you've got an initial anger stage and you work your way through these stages to resolution. I'm not trying to substitute for those, and I'm not trying to work through those with you. I'm just suggesting to you some common points for grief that might help you from a biblical perspective process and work through grief. And so I want to start with the story about Lazarus. Lazarus was a friend of Jesus's. He was a brother to Mary and Martha, and he was very sick. And Jesus was well known as a healer. And so Mary and Martha sent for Jesus to come heal Lazarus. And Jesus, on the way there, stops and we won't say dawdles, because you don't really want to say Jesus dawdled, but he deals with other issues on his way there. And by the time he gets there, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus' sisters are upset because Jesus didn't get there in time to heal him. And they're just very, very distraught. And Jesus is going to resurrect Lazarus from the dead. And so the story is going to have a good ending. But in the process of that, Jesus does something that's profound. Jesus weeps. So here's the Son of God weeping. And he's not weeping because he's going to miss Lazarus. He's about to raise Lazarus from the dead. He's weeping because he's sharing the grief of the sisters. See, when we grieve, God grieves with us. God cares for you and I. And what hurts and bothers and grieves us is something that affects God. And if we know that God shares in that grief, then we begin to understand how God can help us by being a balm for what hurts us. There's a reference in the Old Testament to God being the balm of Gilead. The idea that God is a soothing ointment that goes on our grief. And the reason why is pretty simple. It's not because our grief doesn't count. It's not because our grief isn't deserved or earned. It's because God cares and loves you. And he cares and he loves me. And he wants to meet us in a relationship where he's giving us a spiritual hug in the midst of our grief with a promise that a better day will come ahead. That approach and that understanding biblically helps me process grief. And I hope it does you, because this is your video thought for the day.